Hey everyone, welcome to Software Engineering Mini Lecture Show. Blah. Hey. Hey everyone, welcome to Software Engineering Mini Lectures, episode number 3. We're going to talk about software process models and really talk about Agile and Waterfall. Really focusing on Agile and my experiences with Agile and a little bit about Waterfall and maybe some of my experiences about that too. So really the concept of Agile is to work in small iterations to be able to get to a working product a little bit quicker, small features working quicker, versus a waterfall method is you set a design the requirements up front, then you do maybe the design itself, and then maybe you do all of the implementation, then you do all the tests. And I find that from a large project standpoint, it's challenging to do that. It really, from what I talk about in Waterfall, I think it works really small. It works really well with small projects. You need to get things done, and you don't really have time to go, I guess, iterate through stuff. So just doing one thing, or one small thing, I think that it makes sense. Now, where I think Waterfall breaks down is when you have a really large project that lasts maybe even years. It's impossible you're going to get every single thing done correctly the first time, because basically Waterfall, you're expected to basically everything done right the first time. And that's where I think Agile can play a very big role on getting a product out to the customer quicker to be able to test and get that cycling, that feedback. So some challenges that I have found in the first bullet point is really how long is it going to take to get the project to be complete. Now, when you first start, it can be a challenge you can come up with some estimates. Maybe, for example, a true course project that I'll probably be referencing in most of all these things is we came up with different types of models of what we expect maybe how many like requirements and how many lines of code and how many, really it starts from like the system level requirements. How many system level requirements are we going to have? And then we create a model per kind of like feature or functional area that based off of the system requirements, we'll have X number of high level requirements. Then we'll have, based off of each high level requirement, of X number of low level requirements. And then based off of that, we'll have X number of lines of code and then X number of test cases based off the requirements and test procedures and so on and so forth. So based off of that, you can build a model of how many items you'll probably get, and then you build another model of what the cost will be relative to that model. So maybe a certain area or function or feature will have a cost X number of hours per system level requirement from start to finish, including reviews and all that stuff. So you can kind of come up with those type of models. There are many different ways. I think in some legacy projects in my company, they've created some kind of like estimation of how many lines of code there will be, and then the cost of what each line of code will be from end to end. I think that was not enough granular, so they came up with this new approach, which I think is a pretty good idea. But from a different Agile standpoint, you could just do everything based off of tasks. And over time, you can kind of weight them on how big they are and how small they are. And as long as you have defined all your tasks, or really stories and epics up front and lay them out, you can kind of guesstimate when things will get done and how long they'll take to get done. So it takes a little bit of actually running process type stuff, running and seeing how long things will take up front to be able to estimate how long things will take in the future. So it's an indifferent way of doing it, but in a lot of project managers, they struggle with Agile and trying to figure out when things are done. So another thing too with Agile is understanding, especially in like certifying products like we do in aviation, you have to have formal reviews, and in the past, really formal reviews are you leave that till the end, and once a formal review has been done, when there's a problem, you have to do a problem report, and then there's a whole big process on trying to get that all fixed out. You have to have like a change control board and have to analyze it and make sure. And so really, I think it might be as a different mindset of how we operate, of maybe we do the formal reviews up front, and we only lock down to have that hard change control process once it's delivered to the customer. If there needs to be a fix, then we can have maybe like a low way of making those changes a smaller process. So that's something interesting about Agile. It can be a challenge too that I've experienced. One thing that I really like, it's maybe not specifically for Agile, is that's paired programming, which is part that falls under extreme programming. I think this is really good when you bring up a new person on the team, whether it's a junior engineer or a senior engineer, and that is when something is new, whether we've decided to change how we write our requirements, or this is how we want to write our requirements, or this is how we want to do our design. Set the people up together, whether it's in an online meeting, it doesn't need to be next to each other in a room, and you have the person that's more experienced go through and work some kind of problem, whether it's writing the requirements, doing the code, and until the less experienced person comes up to speed on how we are expected to operate. And then there'll be some point in time where that less experienced person feels comfortable of leading on their own, and they'll switch roles where the less experienced person will drive how to do or doing the certain actions, and then that more experienced person will use that as an opportunity to coach that person. And then once those times are that less experienced person feels comfortable, then you can let them go and work on their own thing. So I don't think paired programming all the time for the whole project probably makes sense. I think once everyone comes up to speed and understands how to do the work, I think that's where to get to that point, paired programming is very effective. So another interesting thing is with mod programming, it can be good for training purposes, where you just sit in a room with many people and you have one person driving, and then you can kind of rotate over time, like maybe every 15 minutes you rotate to the next person, then they drive, and then you have a bunch of, it's kind of interesting, but having like a bunch of people kind of directing you doing those tasks. So another, probably one of the most important things I think in Agile are retrospectives. So that's usually you have a sprint that could be 1, 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, really is up to how the project wants to operate. The beginning is a planning phase, then you do the work, and then at the end is a retrospective. That's something that is so important that I think that even what I have seen in projects doing Agile, they can do retrospectives, but sometimes they think that's not super valuable. But I think it is very valuable, because part of Agile is always improving what you're doing, the processes or how you're doing something, and reflecting on that. So I think that this is a good reflection point to be able to stop and think about, what did we do in the past X number of time frame, and how can we improve on it, and then also talk about what has gone well too, and make sure that we keep doing that, whether it's communication or doing something like called a spot check, where you have someone peek over, look at over their shoulder, look at, hey, can you take a look at this type of thing. Really anything that the team thinks works well or doesn't work well is something that they need to bring up here, and then in the next sprint you kind of work on trying to improve on that. And so you kind of, each retrospective, you evaluate what was the past things that we didn't like to do, and how did we improve, did we meet our goals that we were trying to do. And so in a large project like that, you can get an extreme valuable resources here to share between the whole project. So you kind of, after a team has individual retrospective, you almost have like a project retrospective, where all of, maybe like the leads of the teams come together and talk about their things that they saw that worked well, and things that they, or maybe people, we have an internal tool release and we're all challenged against the same thing, and we found maybe ways of improving how to use it. but one team didn't catch that during that sprint. And if the teams come together and talk about it, then they can learn something from the other team. So I think that's something that to continuously improve is something that's super important. So I wanted to highlight that. And then another thing with Agile is if everyone doesn't buy into the way of thinking, then you're just going to be fighting a losing battle. So whether it's getting to know the team members and trying to understand them and then trying to fit that into our goal, whether they maybe don't like a certain thing, maybe you need to shift some things around to get everyone. I know you're not going to get everyone doing exactly what they want all the time, but being able to optimize that team to go into the right direction of the goal is so important. So and I would even say, to an extent, even if you have like someone that's your best performing person, but they're just bringing so much negativity to that team, and they're not rowing with the whole boat, they might even not be worth it to keep on the team. Or you need to sit down and have that hard conversation with them and make sure that they understand that we're all working towards the same goal, and what can we do? As a leader, what can I do to what have I done wrong, or what can I do to help you buy into what we need to do to accomplish? So yeah, so those are kind of my thoughts with Agile. I think that Waterfall, like I said before, it works good with a small scale project. I don't think it works very well with a very large project, because at some point in time, maybe the customer says, I don't want to be paying for this anymore, and they're going to cut you off. And from an Agile standpoint, if you do those micro releases, those mini releases to the customer, they can have something make it work. Whereas a Waterfall, you might not have half the development, you don't have any artification or certification artifacts at the end, and the customer never gets anything that they really want. So those are some ideas that I've had for software process models. We'll end it here. So thanks all.